Qatar is actually the enemy of the West. Qatar is the enemy of Westernism. Qatar is the enemy of the Western culture because it promotes everything which the Muslim Brotherhood are advocating. Means to destroy the West, to replace the West, and to implement the Sharia wherever they can. This is Qatar. Trump started his second term like 10 months ago in January 2025. At the beginning, first months, everything looked great. He was with Israel wholeheartedly. He actually allowed Israel to acquire any kind of ammunition which Israel needed for the war, which is still unfinished. Unlike what happened with Biden, which was influenced, according to all kinds of publications, by Obama until this very day. And he actually gave Israel an open check to deal with Hamas as Israel sees necessary. And we felt that America is with us wholeheartedly, and we can do, at least as long as the Americans are involved, almost whatever we need to do in order to get rid of Hamas since he was elected or since he actually stepped into the White House. However, the term of the first 10 months of Trump, I would divide them to two parts. One part is what I described, and the second part, which started a few months ago, when he went to the Gulf to collect investments in the economy of the United States. He went to Saudi Arabia, he went to the United Arab Emirates, to Abu Dhabi, and he went to Qatar in order to convince them to invest in the American economy. He expected each and every one of these three countries to invest around $1 trillion. Trillion means 1,000 billions, big money. And he meant business. And we in Israel, okay, he wants money, naturally, wants to make America great again. Great means that he grabs investments. Let it be. However, money doesn't come for free. And these three countries, especially Qatar, started to raise demands. Just to explain what Qatar is. Qatar, first of all, they have unlimited sums of money. They have partnership with Iran in the biggest gas field in the world, which is between Qatar and Iran, under the Persian Gulf. And they take the money from this gas field and they divide it 50-50. One half goes to 80 million citizens of Iran, and one goes to 300,000 citizens of Qatar. Even division. Of course, half and half. So Qatar actually is one of the richest countries in the world, if not the richest one, taking into account its size of population and the expenses which they have to spend. So Qatar, with this money, is ready to support anything which fits the ideology of Qatar. Unfortunately, what happened in Qatar, that since this oil state or gas state supports the Muslim Brotherhood organization all over the world. What happened in Qatar is that one Egyptian Sheikh Dr. Yusuf Qaradawi, the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, migrated to Qatar in order to keep his head connected to his shoulders, because in Egypt, they don't like Muslim Brotherhood, and sometimes they shorten them by head. So he ran away to find asylum in Qatar and approached the ruling family, and he succeeded to turn the direction of the Qatari policy from negating the Muslim Brotherhood to supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood, just in a nutshell, is a organization or group of many organizations whose ideology is divided to three pillars. One is to get rid of the Western occupation of Islamic countries. The second is to get rid of the Western culture which settled in Islamic societies. And the third is to turn the law system in Islamic countries to the Sharia. These are the three, in very short, the three pillars of the Muslim Brotherhood. Western occupation is not only by British or by French, as it was 1928 when this organization was established in Egypt. It also means Arab rulers or Islamic rulers who adhere too much to dictates which come upon them from the United Nations, from the United States, and for Europe. Means Arab and Muslim rulers who run their countries according to the international law or international conventions or international rules, which are dictated by the West, usually Britain, France, United States. Therefore, any ruler who doesn't implement the Sharia in his country, like Mubarak in Egypt, like Assad in Syria, like the King Abdullah in Jordan, and many others, deserve a struggle against them by these organizations of the Muslim Brotherhood because they do not implement the Sharia law. And this is actually, this kind of organizations are sponsored by Qatar. Okay, let it be. So far, it doesn't bother anybody in the West as long as it doesn't come to its own country. Trump asked those investments for those countries. Apparently, Qatar started to make all kinds of conditions. I wrote an article about Qatar. You can find it if you Google it after the lecture. If you Google Mordechai Kedar, Know Thine Enemy, K-N-O-W, Know Thine Enemy. I wrote this article in 2013, some 12 bit more years ago. And in this article, I describe how Qatar is the vile enemy of Israel, and not only Israel. Qatar is actually the enemy of the West. Qatar is the enemy of Westernism. Qatar is the enemy of the Western culture because it promotes everything which the Muslim Brotherhood are advocating. Means to destroy the West, to replace the West, and to implement the Sharia wherever they can. This is Qatar. Unfortunately, people in the United States of America do not read enough about the Arab world from people who know at least something about the Middle East. And I believe that if they read this article, probably Trump would give up on any connection with Qatar because Qatar is the enemy. However, the Qataris have big seichel. They have brains. They try to be nice with everybody. For example, they host the biggest airbase of the American Air Force in the Middle East, in a place named Udeid, next to Doha, the capital of Qatar. Qatar supports politicians on right, left, and center. Right, I mean people like Witkoff, and left, I mean Clinton Foundation. Center, everybody in between, and many are getting good money out of it. I'll just give you an example. But by the way, this money which Qatar gives people is used to buy their silence vis-a-vis what Qatar is doing. I'll give you a good example. As you might know, in 2022, Qatar hosted the what we call the Mondial, the World Cup in soccer. They won this hosting a few years earlier by bribing people from FIFA, the International Federation of Football Association. And people sat in jail. People sat in jail because the money which they got from Qatar in order to vote for Qatar in the competition who will host the games in 2022. Although people spend time in jail, Qatar hosted the games. Now, in order to host the games, you have to build stadiums, dormitories for the players, for the tourists, for the journalists. It's a big event. And you have to pay ways and railroads, all kinds of facilities which will enable these games to be smooth. And they brought thousands of workers from Bangladesh, from Malaysia, from Indonesia to work in construction of those stadiums and everything else. The temperature in Qatar for like 9 months every year is, the average is 50 degrees centigrade in the shade, like sauna. If you go to sauna, you have to go out after like 10 minutes, 15 minutes in order not to put yourself in danger. So if you work from sunrise to sunset in such a temperature, even healthy people can collapse because of problems caused by the heat in the Gulf. And actually, thousands of those workers, although they were healthy people, collapsed and died. So the human rights organizations wrote some report about the violation of human rights in Qatar in those months or those years of construction. And this was a very, very bad report about the Qatari authorities, about their attitude to the workers. Somebody in the European Union wanted to discuss this report. After all, the European Union has business with Qatar, and if Qatar is violating human rights in such a magnitude, the European Union wants to know it. So there was an attempt to discuss this report in the institutions of the European Union in Brussels. However, there was a lady. Her second name was Kali. I don't remember her first name. She was the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the European Union. She was from Greece, and she made everything possible in order to prevent any discussion in this report. People started to be suspicious, and they sent the Greek police to her home to see whether there are all kinds of things there. And they found in her home boxes of cash money. So they asked her, "What is this?" She said, "I don't know." So they asked her father, who lives in her house, "What is this?" He said, "I don't know, but it comes from the Qatari embassy." Okay? This is what I mean to buy people on right, left, and center in order to prevent anything which Qatar doesn't like. Okay? And there are many other examples of how Qatar buys the silence of the world in order to continue what it does. Ladies and gentlemen, Qatar sponsors CARE, Committee on American Islamic Relations, which sponsors, for example, MSA, Muslim Student Association, an organization which leads the anti-Jewish, anti-Zionist, anti-Israel propaganda and activities on American campuses. Means Qatar is behind anti-Semitism in American and I believe also in Canadian campuses, of course in Europe as well. Qatar, as I told you, know thine enemy. Trump went to take money also from Qatar. My heart tells me, I was not in the discussion rooms, that Qatar had all kinds of demands. You want our money? Okay, we'll give you our money, but we have some requests. For example, we want to see a Palestinian state in the foreseeable future. Why do they want it? Because they know that a Palestinian state will turn inevitably into a Hamastan. How? By elections. Because we all remember what happened in January 2006 when the Hamas won the elections to the Legislative Council of the Palestinian Authority. Until this very day, Hamas has the majority in this Legislative Council. Of course, Abu Mazen, the president, paralyzed this organ or this parliament because he didn't like the fact that Hamas controls the majority of the Palestinian parliament. To that degree, he believes in democracy. But, and I'm talking about 2006, almost 20 years. In January, in 2 months, it will be 20 years. 20 years that Hamas have the majority of the Palestinian Legislative Council, and this council is shut down by Abu Mazen. Okay? It can repeat itself. If there is a Palestinian state, it most probably will have a parliament. After all, the world wants to see democracy in the Middle East. So Hamas will win again. No, they won already. So to assume that Hamas will never win again, it's actually against what we already saw. This is one thing. Secondly, we all remember what happened in June 2007 when Hamas took Gaza over by force in some coup d'etat. It can happen again. No, it happened already. So either by elections or by force, Hamas will take the Palestinian state within 1 year, 2 years after the establishing of a Palestinian state. This is why Qatar wants a Palestinian state, in order to build Hamas not only in Gaza, but also in Judea Samaria, if there is a Palestinian state over that area. This is the scheme which Qatar prepares. This is why they demand a Palestinian state. Recently, what we hear from the administration, from the American administration, that at some point we might see a Palestinian state in the future. In my view, this is something which was dictated by the Qataris in order to make sure that Hamas will come back to power in Judea and Samaria this time, in addition to Gaza. Okay, this one. Second thing, what we see during the last month, that Trump actually created a whole coalition of good number of countries to find a solution for Gaza. He called Turkey, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Bahrain, I think also, Egypt, of course, Jordan, Israel, of course, will be involved as well. And did I forget? Tunisia also. Indonesia, yes, also Indonesia. Okay, whoever was, the more the merrier. Excuse me. To put together two rivalry coalitions, somebody didn't make homework here. Why? Turkey, Qatar, and Hamas have one goal, is to preserve Hamas, to make sure that Hamas will control Gaza forever. Qatar supports Hamas, of course, and Turkey as well. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain are totally against it. How can they cooperate? On what? To continue Hamas or to get rid of Hamas? Means already in this coalition of countries which was created in order to take care of Gaza, already there are rivalries inside this group of countries. So what? Will they start fighting each other? I'm not sure. But to think that they will dismantle Hamas and the weapons and confiscate the weapons of Hamas, I think that is premature. And I don't know if there is even one soldier who will come from any country who is brave enough to go to Hamas fighters in order to confiscate the weapons. You know what will happen to him? A shot in the head will be the good case. Okay? So with all the goodwill of all these countries, I don't see Hamas being or give up on the weapons willingly. And I don't see them also bring troops, which will fight just like what we did for 2 years. So really, I don't see any solution coming from this coalition of countries, except for money which will be poured on that place. And I really don't know what else can be done, because nobody is brave enough to go to Gaza or to go to the Hamas fighters in order to ask them to give up on their weapons. However, when Trump talks about the Middle East today, he talks about peace. He actually drew a 20 or 21 points plan in order to put an end to the war. And it worked. The first point, the second point were implemented by releasing of the Israeli hostages, those who are alive and those who are dead. I think two remained, who I hope their bodies will be given to Israel in the foreseeable future. Peace is a situation between two entities, could be between people, between organizations, between states. But peace needs one thing, and this thing is mutual recognition between these two sides, that each side recognizes the right of the other side to exist. Without this mutual recognition, there cannot be any agreement on any peace between two sides, especially peace. Agreement could be, a ceasefire could be. Israel doesn't recognize the right of Hamas to exist. Hamas doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist. Yet, ceasefire can be achieved, and it really was achieved. But peace means, starting with mutual recognition, somebody didn't make his homework to think that Israel will recognize the legitimacy of the existence of organization like Hamas, and somebody didn't make homework to think that Hamas will ever recognize Israel's right to exist. The whole raison d'etre of Hamas is to destroy Israel, even if Israel has the size of a stamp on the seashore of Tel Aviv. Because the mere existence of the state of Israel is a theological threat when it comes to Hamas, as they view Israel, because of various reasons, or because of some accumulative reasons. First of all, according to the view of Hamas, the Jewish religion is null and void, because, as they say in Arabic, din batil. Din is religion, batil, batel, cancelled, because Judaism was cancelled by Christianity 2,000 years ago. Christianity, in its turn, was cancelled by Islam 14 centuries ago. So Judaism actually was cancelled twice, once by Christianity and second time by Islam. So since Judaism is null and void, what is the reason to have a Jewish state? No reason. Second problem is that the land of Israel is actually a Palestinian Islamic soil. And any land in the world which was under Islamic rule should forever remain under Islamic rule. There is no way to take any land out of Islam. Therefore, Spain or the Iberian Peninsula should return to be Islamic. After all, Muslims ruled the Iberian Peninsula, at least parts of it, since 711 CE until the end of 15th century. means like 800 years. So it should remain, it should remain under Islamic rule. And if it was occupied by the Christians in the Reconquista, it should return to be Islamic. The same thing with the island of Sicily, the southern part of Italy. The same thing, large parts of the Balkans, like Greece, Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, all the way north to the gates of Vienna, where they were defeated in September 11, 1683. Okay, now you can tie the threads. And of course, Palestine, which is Islamic land since 628 CE until 1917, until the First World War. No one has the right to take Islamic land out of the Islamic home, Dar al-Islam, and to give it to Jews. Here comes Lord Balfour, the evangelical Minister of Foreign Affairs of the British government, and promises to the Jews. Why? Does it belong to his father, Balfour's father, Balfour's mother? Who the heck gave him the permission to give it to the Jews? It doesn't belong to Britain. It belongs to Islam. So, Balfour Declaration, totally illegitimate. Later, San Remo decision of the League of Nations, April 1920, totally illegitimate. Who gave Palestine, the Islamic land, to the League of Nations to give it to the Jews? Okay? Totally null and void. And all the other documents and the recognition of states in the world in the state of Israel, totally illegitimate, totally illegal, because this land belongs to Muslims. So how can countries like Canada recognize the legitimacy of the state of Israel, which was built on an Islamic soil? So this is another problem. The religion doesn't exist. The land is Islamic. Third problem, according to Hamas and Qatar, is that Jews are not a nation. Jews are communities. Like Jews in Canada are Canadians who happen to be Jewish, just like other Canadians who are Christians, who are Muslims or whatever they are. Jew in Morocco is a Moroccan Arab who happen to be Jewish, just like other Moroccan Arabs who are Muslims. A Jew in Russia is a Russian national who happen to be Jewish, just like other Russians who are Muslims or Christians or whatever they are, and so forth. Jews are not a nation. Jews are communities which belong to all the nations in the world. All of a sudden, the Zionist movement comes and decides that Russians and Yemenites and Iraqis and Moroccans and Canadians and Americans all are one nation. Wow. Do they look alike? Do they eat the same food? Do they speak the same language? Do they wear the same clothing? Do they speak nothing? They have nothing in common. Religion doesn't make a nation. How? Why? Islam has many nations. Arabs, Persians, Turks, Kurds, Baluchis, Kazakhis, Uzbekis, Tajikis, Pamiris, and there are many more. Islam didn't unite them to be one ethnic group, because Arabs are Arabs and Persians are Persians. The same thing with Christianity. There are Christians in Korea, Norway, Canada, South America, and Africa. So are they all one nation? No. These are Canadians, these are Koreans. Religion does not make a nation, okay? Neither in Islam nor in Christianity. So why should Judaism combine the Russian and the Yemenite and the Canadian and the Iraqi to be one nation? Okay? So since there is no Jewish nation, why do they need a state? Let them all go back to the countries which they came from. This is the third problem. The fourth problem, which Qatar believes and spreads, the Jews anyway should live under Islamic yoke as dhimmis, people who live under the protection of Islam because they pay the jizya. Jizya means head tax, which the Jews and the Christians should pay when they are while they are humiliated, as it's stated in the Quran. So the Jew and the Christian should crawl on the ground when it comes to the tax collector to give the money from his hand, had to get a kick and run out of the room. This is how Jews and Christians are or should pay the tax from their hand. Jews and Christians have to be marked in the street. A Jew with a yellow patch and a Christian with purple patch. This is not an invention of the Nazis. This was invented by the Abbasids, means the rulers of Baghdad in the 9th century. Ever since then, the Nazis followed this. They know about this. Why should Jews and Christians be marked? Because they are impure. people should move aside when they walk in the street. And in the street, anyway, Jews and Christians should walk in the middle of the street. Why? Because in the Middle East, the middle of the street was the sewer. Because in those days they didn't have sewage under the city. So everything which came out from the households, not only from the kitchens, was in the street. And in this, a Jew and a Christian should walk in order to belittle them, to denigrate them, and to humiliate them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what Hamas believe, and this is what Qatar promotes. And unfortunately, some politicians in the world, either they ignore it or they don't know it. And this is what they promote. The mere existence of the state of Israel is viewed by these radical Muslims like Hamas, Hezbollah, as a threat to Islam. Because what happens since the late 19th century, when Jews started to build Petach Tikva in 1882, Rishon LeZion, Rehovot, Rosh Pina, Zichron Yaakov, all these Moshvot HaBaron, before the Zionist movement was established, and later, and then Aliyot, Jews are gathering in the land, Jews are purchasing lands, Jews are establishing organizations like the Histadrut as of 1920, Hamagen, the defensive force, the state in 1948, and the occupation of Jerusalem is Jerusalem 1967, as they say. Everything is viewed as some kind of a resurrection of Judaism after it was cancelled by Islam. Judaism comes back to life in the form of a state, in the form of land, in the form of army, government, police, sovereignty, and they cannot accept it because it all means that Judaism comes back to life with the support of Christianity, since Balfour all the way to Trump, who recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. This is a conspiracy of Judaism and Christianity against Islam in order to bring Judaism back to life. This is why Israel deserves jihad. And jihad, as you know, is not only by sword. Yes, it's by sword, but not only. Jihad could be economic jihad. The PDS, this is economic jihad. It could be media jihad, like Al Jazeera. Who operates Al Jazeera? Qatar. Oops, see? Qatar. Al Jazeera, media jihad. Defined by Qaradawi, means the one who Islamized or Ikhwanized, means turned it to Muslim Brotherhood. Qatar, he defined Al Jazeera as a media jihad by himself. I heard it in my own ears. Arson jihad. Every week, ladies and gentlemen, a church in France is being torched. What happened in the Notre Dame was not an act of God, or by chance, or by accident. But they don't speak about this because they are too much afraid, the French, to speak about what really happened there. And we see it in Israel when they set fire in groves, in all kinds of places like this, especially around Jerusalem, in hot days. We see the migration jihad, especially in Europe, but not only Europe. We see what they call the settlement jihad, means to settle in these countries, to establish organizations. Who sponsors this? Okay, so this is what I mean. The jihad, by the way, somebody who cannot perform any kind of jihad because he does the money, doesn't buy Israeli products. So what can he do? The prayer jihad, to pray for the success of the Mujahideen against Israel, where Hamas, Hezbollah, whoever they are. This also kind of jihad which everybody can take part in. So jihad actually in Arabic means, the word means effort. Effort means effort which the Islamic nation is actually investing in something very important. This is the notion of jihad. Of course, it could be by sword, it could be by other means, like economic means, by education, by arson, by many other means, and these are all the notion of jihad. So, Qatar is behind this kind of jihad also, especially the media jihad. Ladies and gentlemen, asking money from Qatar never comes for free. They always have demands. Unfortunately, this, in my humble view, is what pushes some people in the American administration, especially those who are deeply involved with Qatar, especially Steve Witkoff. I don't know if you read about this, but it was published in Israel. He had some failing business in New York. He had a debt of $650 million and money. And the Qataris actually saved him from bankruptcy by covering this debt, something like this. So to think that he is objective when he deals with the Qataris is a bit of naivete, to think that the man is a good negotiator with the Qataris. Unfortunately, Trump chose him. Of course, Jared Kushner also is involved with the Saudis in business. Saudis and the Emiratis, maybe in the Qataris. I don't know if he's involved with the Qataris as well, but definitely it's not something which is far from conflict of interests when it comes to these two people. The outcome is clear. What we hear in the recent days or weeks is some things which might end in a Palestinian state, which will be an existential threat on the state of Israel, because it will be now on the hills which overlook Jerusalem, overlook Tel Aviv, overlook the coastal area, Afula in the north, Dimona in the south, and this is something which Israel cannot tolerate. And since the genes of Hamas is jihad, it could wait for a while. They waited for 16 and a half years since they took Gaza over in June 2007 until they attacked us in such a way in October 7, 2023. It's exactly 16 and a half years, which actually doped Israel, which actually caused Israel not to understand what happens there. And it can take again 16 years until the Israelis fall asleep at the wheel or on guard, and it will happen again. Whoever understands the mindset of Hamas cannot come to any other conclusion. However, we do see people who demand, even in the American administration, who agree to the demand to stay as a Palestinian state, and in my humble view, Israel cannot tolerate it. The problem is that, unfortunately, Israel has no much of a spiel. How do you say spiel in English? Because Israel depends on American support, first of all in the United Nations. In the Security Council, we need sometimes the American veto against all kinds of decisions which are meant to dismantle the Israeli ability to defend itself. Secondly, we depend on the United States of America when it comes to ammunition, bombs and things. And this actually could be been avoided, because some 7 or 8 years ago, when Israel shut down some factories of ammunition, the workers came out with big announcements on the papers. I still remember full page writing, and they wrote, "When you will need ammunition, you will not have it, and we will not be there to produce it." This is what the workers who were fired, unfortunately, from these factories published. And they were right, because depending on America in this issue does not give Israel freedom of how to behave with our neighbors and with our enemies. Israel should, in my humble view, should approach other superpowers to diversify its scale of friends. China, for example, is a good candidate. China has interests, has no ideology. China today is with Iran because of the energy, because of the oil and especially gas. Israel also has gas. Why should we sell it to the Egyptians? We can sell it to the Chinese. It might bring some balance to Israel's dependence on the United States of America, let alone a situation that the Democrats come back to the White House in the United States. What will be then the attitude of the American administration in the future under the Democratic Party to Israel? Wouldn't it be better for Israel to have some more friends in the world, which could be alternative to the American Democratic Party, which turns to be more and more against Israel? Look at what happens in New York recently in the elections. Doesn't it show something about the Democratic Party? I'm afraid that it does. So definitely Israel should start looking now, when it is possible, to start looking for better friends than the Democrats in the United States of America, in order to make sure that Israel will survive forever. It's not happy to talk about these things, because when we see even President Trump, look, some Israeli once described President Trump, that his heart is in the right place. But that's all he can say about him. When it comes to actions really on the ground, there are some questions about what he and his administration, after all, he needs the money from Qatar, and Qatar has all kinds of conditions. So this is actually the situation today. I do hope for better days between us and the United States. I do hope that one day the American administrations in plural will understand the danger which they are under because of Qatar, not danger for Israel, danger for America, because Qatar's money in the American institutions doesn't contribute to the well-being of America, since they are pushing all kinds of ideas which, in my view, undermine the Americanism and the welfare of America by pushing the woke culture, by pushing the anti-American messages which are in American academic institutions as well. All are sponsored by Qatar. Never mind, in addition to what they do against Israelis, Jews, Zionists, so forth, it's also against America. Ladies and gentlemen, Canada is on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. Look at what happens in Europe. What happens today in Canada in regards Islamism. We saw in Europe 20 years ago. If people want to know what might happen in North America in 15 years or 20 years from today, look at Europe today. Because North America is behind Europe in a time lap of 15 to 20 years in this phenomena. And the Atlantic Ocean is not wide enough to keep these countries here in a safe place when it comes to Islamism. Be very careful, because when they come, they start to influence politicians, media people already. So you see it already. As we saw in Europe already 15 years ago. Today it's more obvious in Europe. And as I said, the Atlantic Ocean cannot protect these countries from what is in Europe if people here fall asleep at the wheel. Thank you so much.